So I did a video for my Spanish channel talking about the loss of my dad, Antonio G. Duque. He passed away at the age of 100 on June 18th, a little bit before noon. And I made a video in Spanish and I talked about what that experience has been like for me. It's day 4, and one day it'll be day 1,000. It won't feel any different. You know, my dad was an amazing dad. He was always there for me all throughout my life. He was helping me all throughout college and law school. We used to have great conversations. We would talk for like an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours sometimes. And I did that when I lived in Michigan, and for some reason stopped all of a sudden, and then I would just call him randomly, and I would try to come down every month. Sometimes I didn't come down for 2 or 3, but it never went beyond 3, and it was usually like every month. And you know, when I was here, like, well, not when I was here, but when I was at home. I'm in Kentucky, but when I was with my parents, when I was at home, and here, home still is home, you know? No matter where I live, home is there. He would watch his TV a lot, you know? He used to love tennis. He would watch Rafael Nadal. He used to love the Yankees. He would watch that. He liked boxing and just, you know, he would just watch his TV. Then when I went to the University of Florida, shortly thereafter, my room became his office because he always had an office that he would drive to. So, I mean, he was very much in his world. You know, up until the last few years, he would feed cats around the neighborhood, and he used to go out and walk. We always had a dog at home. He would always walk that dog. So when there was no more dogs to walk, then he also started doing the thing with the cats. So I would say that, like, maybe as the last 2 or 3 years that stopped, but up until about 2 or 3 years ago, he still had a couple of clients who'd work in his office. He would watch TV all day, or he would go and do the thing with the cats. And unless we were going out to lunch or something, or maybe for like a little like drive around, that's all I would see him. So honestly, I talked to him just about as much for many years on the phone as I would in person. But I also had, you know, my cell phone with me at all times, and I would always record us, you know, like little videos. And some of the videos are like 10 minutes long. I would just record for no reason because I have, well, not for no reason, but preparing myself for this day. I always said that I wanted to have, because I have a bad memory, you know. Unfortunately, I don't remember a lot of what happened. My dad lost his parents when he was 5, and he has a very sort of picture-like memory, you know, like very, very much detail-oriented, you know, good pauses in the story, you know, reflecting, and just very, 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 very good storytelling. But it was real. Storytelling is usually fictitious, right? But he had that gift for gab when he was talking about his life. But he also had a lot of suffering because, you know, his uncles raised him as a nephew. There was 2 brothers and 2 sisters. So 3 of them were raised as if they were nephews or nieces. But my dad's youngest sister, she was adopted by the uncles and didn't know that she was also a niece until she got married, like some 20 some odd years later. So her upbringing was very different than my dad's and my uncle Victor and my aunt Benicia. So, but my dad, there was that, the parents, it was huge. He was a little bit of a mischievous child, so I sent him to school in the United States. He was in a academy in Dahlonega, Georgia, which I never was able to take him back to, but I will go and see if I can find it. And pretty much everybody in his class had to go to World War II. He was there during Pearl Harbor and wanted to go. Actually, that's not true. That is not true. He graduated a week before Pearl Harbor, went back to Cuba, then Pearl Harbor happened, and then everybody he went to school with went to Pearl Harbor. And he always said that if he was here in the United States, he would have gone, that he would have wanted to go, and he would have gone because he would have gone. They needed people. He would have gone. And also, it's a military academy, so it's not just like random people. It's people with military training. You know, they're going to go. But the thing is that then he, you know, the whole Cuban Revolution happened. My dad hated Batista, could not stand Batista, gave money to the Fidel people and every guerrilla group that he could find, never knowing they were communists, you know, just you know, because he hated Batista. And he used to work for Romeo y Julieta, which makes cigars. And his boss, Hipólito, a man he had incredible respect for, was summoned to the palace to meet Batista. And my dad said this was after there was a student movement that tried to assassinate him. They went into the presidential palace, and he said there was this one black sergeant on the third floor. This is how my dad tells the story, and he basically entrenched himself, right, or positioned himself between two walls, and he just held off all of these guerrillas until the reinforcements came, and Batista went up in a private elevator. So Batista actually ditched the sergeant, but he had to go to safety, and the sergeant was trying to protect him. And Batista was a horrendous human being, but he was a dictator at the time. And my dad said that when he was summoned, this was like a week or two after, and he said Richard Nixon was in the White House. He was vice president at the time. He wasn't in the White House. He was in the presidential palace in Cuba with Batista. He was there to see Batista. And at the time, he was the VP. And he said that when they frisked him, he giggled. He's like, yeah, like that. And my dad always thought that was funny. And then he also said that when he came in, the pillars were pockmarked full of bullet holes. Because, again, a week and a half earlier, that was besieged. They went in there trying to get Batista, and they couldn't because of that sergeant. And my dad always says that black sergeant. And the reason I think he says that is because in Cuba, even though he didn't see the racial injustice that he saw in the United States when he came to Georgia, to Dahlonega, Georgia, and he mentioned that a lot of that when he came, he was disgusted by it. Cuba still had its problems. And so the irony of a black sergeant basically putting his life between these students, working class and poor and whatnot, your typical revolutionary types, your intellectuals, whatever, because it wasn't a right-left thing. That's not what it was. Everybody wanted Batista out. He knocked out 2 center-right governments when he came back, so it wasn't a right-left thing. It was just but it was just the irony that anybody, but especially somebody that was part of a race or an ethnicity that was done wrong by the government, maybe not Batista's government, but the government in general, that would have that level of it's just he thought that was interesting. I think it's interesting. But then, so another thing with Hipólito, where he worked at Romeo Julieta, when the revolution triumphed, Fidel's people basically, because there was a lot of different movements, they had people that were called interveners basically, and so they were folks like every big company, especially one like Romeo Julieta, was nationalized, meaning that it was usually they paid some kind of money, but it was never the money it was worth. It was a lot less. Sometimes it wasn't even in dollars, which was the preferred at that time because everything was so unstable, but they would pay in Cuban pesos. But in any event, they had taken over Romeo Julieta. So the intervener, which is the government minder, government agent for the Castro government, mind you, this is like 1960. They haven't even been in power for a full year. Goes to Romeo Julieta, and my dad is there with Hipólito, who's the owner, and this guy Saavedra, who was just a real jerk. He wasn't very nice to my dad, and some other bigwigs. And my dad always says he was an industrial partner. He had a 6% participation, but he wasn't actually a equity partner. He was a partner because he was the comptroller and the bookkeeper and the finance guru for them. So they rewarded him with a 5 or 6%, I believe it was 6% participation. So basically, he was allowed. It was like profit sharing kind of thing, like something like that, like a 40, not like that, but it was. He was basically his equity was not because of money, it was because of labor basically. Anyways, but he was part of that, and the intervener looked at my dad and said, "What are we going to do here?" And my dad, instead of answering, looked at Hipólito, at his boss, okay, and so instead of answering the intervener, he said, "Hipólito, ¿qué hago?" Like he looked at Hipólito and he said, "What do I do?" You have to understand what was happening here. The Cuban Revolution at this time was already either communist or on its way towards basically announcing they were communist. They were taking over private businesses. They were naming these government interveners that basically would be the person that was in charge on paper, but someone like my dad, which was the highest labor person, not by money, but labor person, would then be named to run the day-to-day. So basically, someone like my dad would have run that whole company day-to-day, and the government intervener would have been like the paperweight on top of him. You know what I mean? My dad should have answered the intervener, if my dad was part of that program, should have answered the intervener and said, well, we will do this, this, and this. Meanwhile, the owner is just sitting there like a potted plant. My dad didn't do that. Instead, my dad asked that potted plant in the communist eyes, what should I do? Because my dad was loyal to him and not to them. As a result, Many months later, when Bay of Pigs happened, my dad was just working. Actually, my dad was at home, had come home from work, and they came and arrested him, okay? And they put him in the castle, El Castillo, and he was there for like 11 days. Why? He wasn't part of the Bay of Pigs. He wasn't openly like trying to bring down the Castro government, but because in the factory, he looked to his boss instead of the intervener. They put him down as a possibly troublesome person. Because remember that the Eastern Bloc countries, their documentation's off the chain. And when that little tiny thing got written down, and when Bay of Pigs happened and they were expecting a Cuban invasion and the Navy, U.S. Navy to get intervene and all that, they wanted all the people that they thought maybe were going to be a problem just kind of put away. And that's where my dad was at. And he'll never forget. And as a result of that, being, threatened with execution by some, jerk prison guard, some buck private with not enough power to have the keys to unlock a lock. Still, though, he's got a bayonet, and he's eating real well, and he's showering, and he's sleeping at home. And there's all these hundreds, if not thousands, of prisoners who haven't eaten. My dad hadn't eaten in like 2 days, who hadn't showered, hadn't shaved, had no idea why they were being held, didn't know what was going to happen to him. So, even though this buck private with no power, he's the one with the bayonet, he's the one with the freedom. All these people are at his mercy. That was enough for my dad. He came to the United States in 1961, and he had a guy named Nat Rogers, a Jewish guy from New York who he adored and who really looked out for him. Because of Nat, my dad had residency in a week, and he was a citizen very quickly. He worked for Nat for many years. They were friends forever. And then my dad met my mom in the 1970s. I was born. We lived in Jersey for 4 years. And he just up and decided we were going to move to Florida while me and my mom were in Chile on a trip. We come back. We no longer live in Jersey. Now we live in Florida. And, first couple of years were rough. But my dad, we bought the house. My dad bought the house. My dad always had a job, always worked his butt off, and we were okay. The marriage between my mom and dad was very dysfunctional, but I do think they loved each other. My dad, I wish, would have been a lot better with my mom, but it is what it is. I mean, that's again, my dad, there's a lot of stuff going on, and anyways, but it was good for the most part. It was really good, and the relationship I had with my mom, the relationship I had with my dad, that's what all mattered to me. The relationship they had was very unique, but my mom always stood by his side. My mom took care of him to the very end. When he was at the nursing home, he took a fall in January, and since that fall, he wasn't able to stand up. He was basically bedridden. It was very sad. But he was in amazing facilities. The facility where he was at, we had to fight so hard. We had to get lawyers involved. It was really expensive, time-consuming, gut-wrenching. My mom is the one that bore 90% of that, but we got it done. But the last months of his life, he was barely eating, living on Ensures, basically Ensure ice cream, Ensure milkshakes. His dentures weren't staying in place because his mouth wasn't strong enough. They stopped moving him around because he couldn't get up. He had to be turned. He had to be changed. It was just not a life for him, And I saw him 10 days before he passed, and I hugged him. And even when I saw him at the beginning of my 4-day trip, he was just so skinny, But my mom every day would make a special stew for him that had potatoes and steak, and stuff. And she would bring it to him, and he would eat that, and a big cup of that, And we would bring him ginger ale and Sprite. My sister would go every week. I would try to go every month, every 3 weeks, something like that. I had already bought my ticket. I had seen him on the Wednesday, and I bought a ticket. It was barely 3 weeks, But I work in Louisville, and the thing about it is, when we brought him to that facility, I had a 3-hour meeting with the staff, very early on, and they just listed a gajillion different things that were wrong with my dad that we never knew about. He was at stage 3 kidney failure or something. We didn't know that. He was going to the doctor, but he wasn't getting I don't know. I don't even know how that's possible. I really don't. And I don't know if something like that can happen that quickly. I don't know. But he had aortic issues. He had the kidney issues. He had the issues with his fall. He had a bed sore we never knew about. It was actually when he got there, because he actually, we don't know that he had it with us, because when he was in the hospital, he was in the hospital for like 2 or 3 weeks, and they didn't move him. I don't know, but they were able to cure that, and he was like, it was healing quickly, and they did a phenomenal job. But he just had a lot of things going on, and so all that time that he would spend by himself, and he was, him and my mom, were like kind of like, they didn't like really hang out a lot, and I don't know, I just, like the kidney thing, he must have known about. The bed sore thing might have happened during the hospital. My dad was walking around, showering, shaving, everything on his own. Just the mere suggestion of someone helping him, he would blow up. So, like I said, for him, life took a dramatic change in late January, and it just got worse and worse and worse. And I miss him so much. I miss him so much, and I would do anything to be able to give him a hug, talk to him. But I also know that he was suffering. I mean, he wasn't in pain, but he hated his life. And that's just so selfish for somebody to just say, in the time that he was there, like I covered a bodybuilding show. I was in El Salvador early on. I mean, because I had already bought my ticket and he was already safe, but I was like, I did a lot, and to think he was always in that bed unless he was being changed or something. Not the whole time, but at least the last month or so, month and a half or so. It would just be so incredibly selfish for me as a son, or my sister as a daughter, or my mom as a wife, or anybody really or my brother Tony as his son, for anybody. My cousin Robbie and him had a very close relationship. Anybody that wanted him to continue on living like that just so we could go and say hello or something, that would be incredibly selfish. So, and I know he didn't suffer because they called my mom at like, I think it was like 10 to 11, and she was at the nursing home at 11. It was like, it's a 15-minute drive with no traffic. She got there in 10 minutes or so. I don't know, but she's never gotten a ticket in her life. So maybe there was like no traffic. Anyways, and by 10 to noon, he had passed, and he was having trouble breathing. They put him on an oxygen machine, and not a ventilator. He was just getting oxygen, and it looked like he was getting stronger. But he passed. He just passed. My mom noticed he wasn't moving, and the nurse confirmed it, and he passed. And I just have a feeling that he didn't suffer because he was unconscious, and I don't think he felt a thing. And so that's important. I don't think he suffered when he passed. I don't think he was in pain his last months, but he wasn't enjoying it. I'll tell you that. And so, yeah, But I'm very grateful because I got to have my dad till I was 45, and he got to live to 100, and that's a huge blessing. It just sucks because I can't talk to him, And I believe in heaven. I believe in God. I'm not religious, but I really, really, really hope that there's something else out there. I really would love to see him again. But the best I can do is try to, honor him with my life and what I do now moving forward, what I've done before. But, so anyways, his name was Antonio G. Duque. He was born April 6th, 1924. He passed June 18th, 2024. And he was an amazing person, hilarious, had a lot of quirks about him. But I loved him so much. I love him so much. And it is past tense, but past tense doesn't, I don't know. There's nothing wrong with making that mistake every so often, But anyways. And the folks on Facebook were great. I mean, I posted like 20 minutes after he passed, my mom called me. I posted this like good sized post, which you can check out at christianduke.com. I actually wanted to keep that, and I may incorporate the comments somehow. I may actually do that. I think it'll take a little bit of time, but I think I'm actually going to do that. I'm going to do that. That's the best thing I could possibly do, is include, because I'm trying to figure out how to print those comments and keep them with me, but I'm going to put them in the tribute, almost like as if it was like an obituary kind of thing, or a tribute. I don't know what it's called, but I'm going to do it. And I've kept a couple of the comments unanswered because I want to answer them now. And I feel like I'm hoarding comments and like leaving them for later because it gives me something to do, and it keeps it, I'm still able to talk to somebody about, I don't know what it is. Grieving is a very interesting process. It's a gut-wrenching process, but we got to get through it. Our loved ones wouldn't want us to give up. Our loved ones wouldn't want us to break down. Our loved ones would want to, for us to be successful and happy. And that doesn't mean that we have to ever forget them and not think about them and not reflect on what would they do, or ask them, can you something, or hope that you'll see them one day again. But this is, I guess, part of growing up. I'm 45, but I lost my grandma, who I adored 10 years ago, and that toughened me up a little bit. Losing my dad is certainly different. And my mom I have with me, so I have to double up with my mom. She's 83. She's a tank, but I've got to double up, because now it's just the two of us, So we have a lot of good friends. Her friend Christine is like her sister. My titi Raquel was very close with me. She's like a second mom, My mom has a neighbor, Nancy, who's amazing. A neighbor, Jorge, who's amazing. She has really good friends down there. Bill is a good friend of hers. Mariana is a good friend. She has a lot of good people around her. Christine being the closest, but Nancy's gotten very close as well. And and the thing is that that's important, because I tell her, Mom, just come to Kentucky, like sell the house, do something, but come to Kentucky or I'll go there. And she says, look, you hate Miami, which I kind of do. And she says, you love Louisville, which I kind of do. And she doesn't want to come up here. She won't know anybody. And those friends that she has are very important to her. Her cats, she feeds her cats every day. That's very important to her. Mariana, Bill, and my mom, they're all involved with the cats. There's a lady named Cheryl was also involved with cats. The people that feed the cats, Juana, another lady, the people that feed the cats have a heart of gold. They may have whatever imperfections or flaws, but the fact that every day they take food and water to feed dozens of cats who otherwise would go hungry. And my dad did that too. My sister does that too. I don't do it. I should do it. I really should, That's a very, very beautiful thing. A very beautiful thing. And my sister's former partner, Miriam, who we adored, I loved her like another sister, also fed animals. So that's just that really says a lot about a person. There's people that are cruel to animals, and we know what they secretly are, serial killers and such. But people that are good to animals, to the sense that they will fight with other people that say, why are you doing this? Why are you feeding these animals? Why are you blah, 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 blah? They will actually stand their ground, and sometimes it's not so safe. My sister at some hospital, medical facility somewhere, it got a little dicey. My mom's had a couple dicey also encounters as well. Like I said, people that go out of their way to feed animals, to protect animals, to stand up against asshole humans to protect those animals, it says a lot about that person. A lot. My dad had an issue with a lady. I'm not going to say exactly where, but he had an issue with a lady, and then her grandchildren got involved, because that's the kind of family, one scumbag, breeds more scumbags. But the point is that my dad stood his ground, and what he did is he came at different times, and that's when my mom and dad were incorporating this whole thing where to deal with people. There was another guy my mom had to deal with by the canal, some short, ugly midget. He had this stick, and he'd hit the stick and hit the stick and hit. So that would scare the cats. He's a moron, an absolute idiot. The point is that instead of, you got to choose your battles, right? You got to choose your battles. So all of them, instead of like having to have these constant encounters with jerks, they just basically changed up their schedule so the jerks didn't know when they were coming. A little bit of like, a misdirection. But my dad would go late at night, early in the morning, whatever it took to throw off these people. If he saw a light go on in the window, he just started walking. It wasn't that he was running. It's just, you got to pick your battles. And ultimately, who suffers during these battles? It's not the humans, it's the animals. Because at some point, the good Samaritan, the good animal lover will leave, and the poor animals are left around the vicinity of this horrible human being. So you have to choose your battles, and you have to think before you act. And so what they did was they just came at different times, and they made it work. And it's also very expensive. Nobody gives you the food. You may get a bag or two here or there, but it's very expensive. And I really thank my sister and Bill, because they give my mom food so she can do that. And I've told her a million times, I'm going to start doing it as well. It's very expensive. Like those big 20-pound bags, I think 2 of those bags are used up on certain days. So in 1 or 2 days, one of those 20-pound or 30-pound bags could be gone. We're talking lots of cats. And they also help. My mom helps. My sister helps. Miriam may have helped. And Bill and them may have helped as well in getting these animals spayed and neutered. That's a little bit different because now you're working with like pet rescue organizations and stuff like that. But they also did that. Cheryl, a friend of my mom's, did a lot of that. So anyways, I just hope my dad's up in heaven, feeding cats with our dog Blackie and Lester, and with all the cats that we've had, that he could see his parents. I hope I can see him one day. And I'll tell you one last thing. I was in the parking lot at the Galt House, because that's the parking lot we use for the Truist building. And I felt, this is before my mom called, I felt like this black shadow come by the side of me. And I don't know what caused it. It may have been traffic or something, but it's weird because that was the only one. And it was a weird feeling. I don't want to say it was cold, but it was a weird feeling. And then my mom called like a couple of minutes later, but my dad hadn't passed. She called to say that his breathing had gotten very weak. And 50 minutes from that call forward, he passed. My sister, I believe, had said something. My mom definitely said she felt my dad was in the house, and so much so that she got alarmed and went to the front. But this was not after he passed. This was before he passed. She said she thought he was in the house, and she had already made the lunch she was going to bring to him. Remember the soup that she made? So she thinks, I don't know. And one thing that my mom wants to do that brought a tear to my eye, well, I don't know if I should say this, but I'm going to say it. She wants to bring his ashes to the house just one time before they're brought to the cemetery, because she wants my dad wanted to come back to the house so badly, and kept asking about that. When am I going to go home? When can I get out of here? And he loved his house so much. And it was really a home. And my mom wants to bring him back just one time so that he can, and I know that some people will say that's spiritual. Other people, I don't know. She wants to do it. And I think it's very sweet and a very beautiful thing that she had that thought, and especially if she does it. Me personally, I'd prefer to have Dad either at my mom's house or my house. I don't want him sprinkled or anything like that, but because he didn't want that, I would like to have that done at some point. But when I'm dead. But please don't cremate me while I'm alive. But I would like to have him at home. And my mom says, like, well, what about if there's like a hurricane or something like that? Your dad, and but she does admit that Christine does it. So I don't know why she can't. But we're gonna honor. Dad wanted to be at the cemetery. Dad bought like these plots or whatever he bought. I don't know what he bought. I don't want to be in a cemetery. By no means do I want to be in a cemetery, and I certainly don't want a headstone or anything like that. But he's 100, and maybe that's what you did then. I don't know. I don't want to do it. But so we believe it's his wishes to be at the cemetery. We also believe it's his wishes to have been cremated. My dad was a CPA. My dad, has been accused of being cheap. I would argue he was frugal, but maybe he was cheap. I don't know. But no, he was not cheap with me, ever. Or with school. And my mom's the one that bought the clothes. Sometimes she got paid back, sometimes she didn't, but my parents did never cut corners with me. So I'm very, very grateful. But being the frugal or cheap or, fiscal-minded person that he was, my dad would never have stood for a funeral and told my mom he didn't want a funeral because it's just a license to steal. I will say I dated a funeral director. I won't say where. It's expensive. Even when they cut you a deal, it's expensive. So my dad wasn't about all that. So, I'm trying to honor him however I can with this video, with the Facebook post, LouisvilleKY.online. I put out my first post. I'd been sitting on it for like 6 months. I said, I'm going to do this. And I included my dad. And I said that, my dad inspired me to do that, and hopefully I'll continue on with that and continue on with all my projects and go to work and give my best, because that's really important. In any event, I am so happy that I was able to do this. I don't know who's going to watch this. It doesn't really matter, because I want this to be on my channel for however long I'm alive, because however long I'm alive, provided YouTube's around, this video will be here. But this is a video I'm definitely going to save, and it will be up somewhere, anywhere, but it'll be up so long as I'm alive, because I feel it's important. And we're coming up on 30 minutes, and with the intros and all that, it's going to be a little bit over. But thank you so much. for whoever listened to any portion of this. And if you're listening to this portion, either you heard the whole thing or you just skipped to the front, to the back, or whatever. Either way, I appreciate it. And Dad, rest in peace. I love you, miss you, and I'll never forget you. And I'm just dreaming about hugging you and giving you a kiss on your sort of raspy cheek, and pancakes, breakfast, Denny's, IHOP, Versailles, a lot of food. Loved Olive Garden, eggplant parmigiana all the way, minestrone soup all the way, coffee with a godly amount of sugar every day. Loved your muffins from Costco. Loved Rafael Nadal on tennis. Loved the New York Yankees. Never liked the Marlins for whatever reason. Loved watching boxing.